me if this sounds familiar. Someone comes to you with something they're carrying. A problem, a confusion, a situation they've made worse. And before they've even finished explaining, you already understand. Not just the facts, the why behind the facts, the fear underneath the why. You understand why they did what they did, even when it hurt you. You understand the relationship that cost you years, because you could always see their wound more clearly than they could ever see yours. You understand, and you adjust, and you accommodate, and the conversation ends without the rupture that probably needed to happen. People have told you your whole life that you're easy to talk to, that you never judge, that they feel safe around you. They mean it as the highest compliment. They're not wrong about what they see, but there's something they can't see because you've gotten very good at making sure they can't. What you do with everything you swallow. Carl Jung had a word for the mask we build for the world. He called it the persona, from the Latin word for the theatrical mask worn by actors in ancient Roman amphitheaters. That mask, he wrote in his collected works, is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society, designed on one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. Every role develops its own persona. The professor and his textbook, the surgeon and her precision, the caregiver and his warmth. But here's what Jung wrote next. And this is the part that took me a long time to sit with. The danger is that they become identical with their personas. The professor with his textbook, the tenor with his voice. Then the damage is done. The person who understands, who has understood for so long and so fluently, who has made understanding their primary way of moving through the world, can become identical with that role. They cannot respond to pain without first translating it into something more charitable. They cannot feel the first feeling without immediately editing it. They cannot have a reaction without running it through the other person's perspective first. The persona isn't the problem. We all need one. We couldn't function in the world without it. The problem is when it becomes the only face available, when the mask fits so well that you've forgotten there's a face underneath it. And this is where Jung got precise in a way that's hard to look away from. A man cannot get rid of himself in favor of an artificial personality without punishment. Punishment, not consequence, not natural cost, punishment. What he observed was this. Everything you suppress doesn't disappear. It accumulates, it builds, and then it surfaces, usually at the worst possible moment, in the most disproportionate way. The flash of contempt for someone you've been giving everything to. The rage that seems to come from nowhere over something small. The cold thought that arrives in the middle of genuinely caring for someone. Sharp enough to shock you because it doesn't match who you've worked so hard to be. Jung described what gets buried in the shadow of the understanding persona. Sudden irritability, coldness, an eruption that embarrasses you and that you quickly explain away. But he wasn't describing an isolated incident. He was describing a pattern, the return of what was never allowed to leave cleanly. The shadow doesn't disappear because you've become too self-aware to express it. It just waits. There was something my ex-wife said near the end of our marriage that I didn't understand until years later. She told me she'd always felt understood by me, and that somehow, over time, that had started to feel lonely. She wanted to be disagreed with, occasionally. She wanted to encounter me, not just to be met where she was. I'd been so fluent at comprehending her that I had stopped being someone she could genuinely push back against. And a relationship without real friction isn't intimacy. It's presence without contact. I want to tell you something about Jung himself, because I think it matters here. Jung spent 6 years trying to understand Sigmund Freud. He accommodated the hierarchy between them, contained his disagreements in careful, measured letters. By every account, he was an unusually devoted follower, And then, in 1912, he published work that directly contradicted Freud's core framework. The libido wasn't sexual energy alone. It was something larger, more fundamental. Jung had reached the limit of his own performance of understanding, and something truer came through. The relationship ended. Freud's final letter, in January of 1913, was cold and absolute. Jung descended into what he later called his confrontation with the unconscious. He wrote later, in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, that the relationship had inhibited his scientific freedom. Not because Freud was unreasonable, because Jung had been performing understanding instead of practicing it. He'd been so fluent at comprehending Freud's perspective that he'd stopped taking his own seriously. The break wasn't a failure of understanding. It was the first time Jung prioritized understanding himself over understanding someone else. Here's what I kept returning to after I first sat with Jung's concept of the persona. The people most capable of understanding others are often people who learned very early on that it was safer to understand than to be understood. Safer to adapt than to insist. Safer to make room for everyone else's reality than to occupy space with your own. What it cost you is harder to name because it's an absence rather than a pain. You stop reaching for your own reactions first. You stop checking in with what you actually want before asking what everyone else needs. Not because you've abandoned yourself consciously, but because the habit of translating outward has become so automatic that the inward translation simply doesn't happen anymore. The mirror does not flatter, Jung wrote. It faithfully shows whatever looks into it. The face we never show the world because we cover it with the persona. There's a question worth sitting with quietly, not urgently. The last time you left a conversation feeling genuinely seen, not useful, not needed. Not the one who made everything easier for everyone else, but actually seen. When was that? If that's hard to answer. If the moments where you feel most fully yourself are somehow rare. If you notice that you understand everyone in the room more clearly than you understand what you're actually feeling in that moment. Jung would say that's not evidence that you lack depth. It's evidence of how well the mask fits. The hidden danger of being too understanding is that it looks like virtue, and it is, partly. But the other part is a very old and very quiet act of self-erasure. A habit, built long before you could name it, of making yourself small enough, smooth enough, reasonable enough to be safe in a room. Jung's answer wasn't less understanding. It was turning that same capacity, precise, generous, genuinely attuned, toward the one person you spent years forgetting to include. You've always been good at understanding what everyone else needs. The question worth sitting with tonight is whether you're willing to find out what you do.